Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Then King, I am finally getting around to making a video that I have wanted to do since before even filming my very first video for this channel almost 2 years ago. We are talking about combat and tactics in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. This is going to be more team level things, not necessarily class or character specific. They are general guidelines. They are things that I have found to be helpful in my campaigns and that I have seen be successful in actual play from other creators. If you have anything else that you would want to add, leave a comment. If you've got some ideas for more advanced stuff, also leave a comment. We'll probably do a follow-up diving into some more specific things after this general set of guidelines. Let's get going. Now, the very first, and I think very most important thing, though I will admit it's a bit cheesy and a bit meta, is to focus your fire, meaning you concentrate all of your actions, all of your attacks on one creature before moving on to the next. It's kind of meta because this wouldn't work so well in the real world, but it can work out quite well in this system. Remember that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a monster with just a single hit point left still gets its full turn and can do full damage with its strikes and has its full attack accuracy. It can still set up flanks with its allies to debuff you. It can still grab you. It can debuff you otherwise. It could trip you. It could at least just stand there and impede your movement, forcing you to go around or attempt a tumble through. So even though a character is on the brink of death, in most circumstances, it is still just as deadly as it is with a full complement of hit points. Therefore, it is much better to face only a single creature with a full complement of hit points than it is to face multiple creatures who are all on the brink of death. Just imagine this, squaring off against 5 creatures that each have 1 hit point. Well, that is 15 enemy actions that you have to deal with on your turn or in the round. 15. Compared to, same amount of hit points, a single creature with just 5 hit points. Still 5 total hit points that your party has to deal with, but now that is only 3 enemy actions that you have to defend. And to give even more of an example, let's do an A and B of you are squaring off against 4 creatures who are totally equal to you. To make the math simple, we'll say that you all have 15 hit points each, as do the enemies, and on your turn, you are each going to deal a reliable 5 points of damage. We'll give the bad guys a slight advantage by going first in initiative, and if you were just to square up against each other, they would go and they'd drop you to 10 hit points, and then you would go and you would drop them to 10. Then they would go and they drop you to 5, then you would go and you drop them to 5, and then they get to go and it's a total party kill. So what do you want to do instead? What does the math look like when you are actually focusing fire? Same scenario. They're going to go first and they are not going to focus fire, so they are going to attack all of you and they're going to knock all of you down to 10 hit points. But then you are going to go and you're going to concentrate 3 attacks on one of them, killing it, and then you will have another action left to knock another creature down to 10 hit points. Well, the bad guys are going to go again, but they only have 3 monsters now. So they're going to knock 3 of your players down to just 5 hit points. The one of your players will remain at 10 hit points. Now it's your turn, and you can focus 2 attacks on the already injured monster, killing it. Then you have 2 attacks left to knock another monster down to only 5 hit points. It's the enemy's turn again. They go, but now they only have 2 players left, and they're bad at tactics, so they attack your character with 10 hit points, knocking it down to 5, and then, unfortunately, they do take a player out. But now it's your turn again. You have 3 players left. You knock out their injured monster and reduce the only remaining monster to 5 hit points. That last monster goes, unfortunately felling another hero. But on your last turn, you still have 2 heroes standing who easily dispatch the 1 creature remaining. So it is the same party size, the same enemy size, the same level, just a difference in focusing your fire. And the outcome difference is a total party kill, a total party wipe on one hand, and then walking away with, yes, needing some healing pretty desperately, but a victory on the other. And the focus fire rule also applies to things other than doing damage. This applies to debuffs as well. You want to frighten and then maybe flank one creature, so you can drop its armor class by quite a lot, making it a very easy target to wipe out. If you kind of use your support players, whether they're casters or support marshals, as marking the enemies, that's a good way to do it. You kind of say, well, I'm going to demoralize this creature, and then I'm going to move next to it. Well, that signals to your marshals, maybe you've got a fighter who's going to be up next in initiative, that the fire is being focused on this enemy. That's the one that I should go and attack. If you follow this, you are going to find that you are able to clear enemies off the board quite a bit easier than if your team spreads out, which sort of feels better. I do admit it feels a little bit like a cheat focusing fire, and it also feels so basic, but you kind of have to do this. Otherwise, you will be facing a lot of very difficult encounters. Point number 2 goes hand in hand with point number 1 because it is choosing your targets. So you want to focus fire, that's what we established already, but you need to know where to focus that fire. Who do you concentrate on? There are lots of considerations, and I think multiple different answers for this, but I certainly have mine, which we will go through. You kind of think about things like, well, am I going to take out a minion first, or the bad guy, or the spellcaster, or the big brute first? And I say, and this might be something that some people disagree with, I say generally take out whatever creature you can take out most easily first. You might identify a creature that has a weakness to some types of damage that your party can deal. Or maybe you identified the monster, the only monster that doesn't have a resistance. So you're going to struggle with a lot of these monsters, but this one you'll be able to take care of easily. Maybe there is a physically isolated creature. There's one here and there are 3 over there. You go for that one first. Maybe there is very clearly an under-leveled character, like there are 2 bigger bears and then 1 small fox, and you figure that fox is probably a lower level than those bears. Let's start there. This is something I do believe in. I believe in clearing out the battlefield as quickly as possible. The other school of thought here that some people have is clear out the higher level enemies first. Take out the boss before the minions. And in terms of meta and gameplay, sometimes that actually does work because there are either mechanics written into the adventure path or that your GM is kind of going with that will say, well, once the boss gets to a certain level, they either surrender and tell their minions to go home, or the minions kind of lose faith and flee. But I still think you don't know that. You don't know that's going to be the case, so you want to start with the minions. Because remember, the minions, kind of like a creature with only 1 hit point left, they can still flank you, setting you up for other minions, or setting you up for the boss, who is most surely going to crit you if you are being flanked. They can still take 3 actions to attack you. They're going to roll an nat 20 in there somewhere, and you'll be in your big boss fight, and some like little minion will take you out with a critical stab to the back, and you'll feel pretty silly about that. They can impede your movement still, so they can hem you in so you can't escape from the boss. Just remember, it is not only you, the heroes, that can benefit from teamwork. In fact, there are some monsters that even have teamwork feats. So yeah, clear them out as quickly as you can. And then back to hedge my bets again and maybe agree with people who think the opposite, or just to talk about the reality of this game for both points number 1 and number 2, focusing your fire and clearing out the lower level enemies first by choosing your targets. Is there a boss level character that is healing the minions or rallying them? Or is there maybe a summoner who is summoning creatures for you? There might be a good reason to target that higher level creature first in this circumstance, though I would still say focus your fire on them when you are doing this. There might be a strategic objective that you have to reach, where you know if you get to this lever and pull it, that is going to end combat. So, well, then you want to try to make your way through the enemy in front of the lever, even if it's not the lower level creature on the battlefield. There might be a super key defensive thing that you need to do, like there is something attacking one of your spellcasters. There are so many other examples, and it should be a dynamic, intriguing game like this. So that's why these are guidelines, and sometimes you might have to change it up from what I am stating here. The last thing that I want to say about these first 2 points of focus fire and choose your targets is this will have the side effect of just speeding up your sessions because you are removing creatures from the battlefield, yes, but you are also removing them from initiative. So if you have a party of 5 and you are up against 5 creatures, well, that's 10 characters, 3 actions every round. That is a lot to get through. If you don't choose targets and you don't focus fire and you spread out and it is a fight to the death and you fell every enemy only in the last round, that is all of your rounds with all of the characters taking a turn. Versus if you are able to remove characters, maybe one character each round from the battlefield, the rounds will get shorter and shorter, and you're just going to have more fun when you're getting through more encounters and you're doing so with ease. On to my third piece of advice for successful encounters, and that is make the enemy move, make them waste their actions. Now, this, I'm going to be honest here, I'm mostly calling out your barbarians and fighters and other people with sudden charge who often go right to the enemy and sometimes get themselves in a bad situation when, in reality, you can hold back. Remember, striding, stepping, they're helpful, but while you're doing that, you're not attacking, you're not recalling knowledge, you're kind of not doing anything to directly end the combat. So if you can, you should delay or maybe even ready an action and make that monster move to you and then hit them with a prepared attack, or let them come at you and sure, take an action to strike at you, but now you have 3 actions, you're already next to it, to strike, or maybe 1 action to get into a flank and then strike. That is a lot better than taking 2 actions to get out there, only 1 action to strike, and then forcing all of your allies to do the same. That is a key thing to remember. It's not just you. If you are the first player in your team to go and you take 2 stride actions to basically draw the battle lines up front, you kind of force a lot of your teammates to do that, especially if you are a martial and melee heavy team. You know, maybe your casters and ranged characters only need to take 1 stride action to get into range and then attack. But even then, wouldn't it be better if they didn't have to move before using one of their cantrips and they could instead recall knowledge so that they know what the enemy is weak to or which save they want to target, and then they use 2 actions to do that rather than take an action to move and then cast the wrong cantrip out of that. So very basic, but just kind of hold if you can, though try not to do it too much because I'm sure your GM will get sick of it and find some way to have that strategy blow up in your face spectacularly. Item number 4 pairs with item number 3 in that they both revolve around patience. Item number 3 was kind of hold your line, make the enemy come to you, make them waste their actions, take your time. Number 4 is wait for buffs. If you have a buffing support character on your team, delay until it is their turn. Generally. Again, there are so many exceptions to all of these things, there might be a reason not to delay. But if all things are equal, delay. Get that bonus from Courageous Anthem. Get a +1 to your attack roll and a +1 to your damage roll. Get a bonus from Runic Weapon or Bless or something like that. But again, if you charge forward and then your cleric wants to use Runic Weapon on you, which I think is a touch range, they have to then catch up and then use their 2 actions to do that, leaving them out of a 3rd action. And that is on the good side of things because a lot of times your marshals will have extra movement, so they might be able to move out of range so that your cleric would need to use 2 stride actions to catch up and then cannot have the appropriate actions left to cast a buffing spell on you. And if that continues, your support characters are just chasing the supported characters around, not actually supporting them. That's not great. This can also apply to positioning. You can prepare a strike, you can prepare a reaction for when a flank is set up. So you could do something like hold your position, or maybe you make 1 strike, You're already in position. You make one strike, and then you say, I'm going to ready an action until the monk moves into the flank. And then you do that. That is better than continuing to swing with the multiple attack penalty on a normal enemy. In this case, you are waiting for a debuff, but because it's a debuff, that's an action of an ally. It's kind of a buff in a way. But the point is, if you can afford the actions, if there's no reason to charge forward, don't. Stay back, let your teammates who are there to bolster your attacks do that before you start attacking. So the last 2 points were kind of about waiting, but point number 5 is the opposite. It is about doing something a little bit sooner rather than later. I believe strongly that you should heal sooner rather than later. If you are playing as a support healer, I think you want to heal people before they go down in combat. Sometimes, yes, it can feel like a little bit of a gamble. You have 2 people who are hurting. You don't know which one is going to be attacked necessarily. You don't know who to heal. It kind of feels like a waste if you heal one person and then the other one is attacked and the person you healed doesn't, receive an attack for the rest of combat. But I still say you don't know that, but what you do know is that a lot of actions are wasted when someone drops in combat. Remember that if you wait to reactively heal someone until after they fall unconscious, well, their next turn is pretty much wasted. They're going to have to stand up, grab their weapons, and probably move in order to get into position to do anything again. And they're also going to be wounded now. They were dying and they came out of dying, so they gained the wounded condition, which means you need to be extra careful with that character and might result in a few times where they do things like take an extra defensive action that they normally wouldn't take, prolonging the encounter even more. If you compare that to a proactive heal, where you heal someone before they fall unconscious, well, they don't have to stand up and pick up their weapons. That's basically an entire turn where they continue to be effective. It also means that if they do end up dropping later in combat, well, at least they're only going to be dying 1 or maybe dying 2 if they were critted, rather than being dying 2 or dying 3, causing you to maybe need to heal them again, the same character again, to keep them from permanently dying. So get out there as a healer. I do like, Rousing Splash and other cantrips like that offer a little bit of temporary hit points. This is also where protection can kind of come in, of keeping people alive rather than resuscitating them after they have dropped. And my last point for this video is to pick and support your fight MVP. This ideally should change a little bit from encounter to encounter, though I would generally say the fight MVP is going to be your hammer, because their primary role is dealing damage, and dealing damage leads to dead creatures, and dead is the best condition. So here are 2 examples of having a barbarian and a fighter in your party and knowing which one you would actually pick as your fight MVP in different situations. Situation number 1, you go up against a creature with a large well of hit points, low armor class, and is immune to crits. In that case, you want to support the barbarian because they are going to deal more damage on their strikes with rage than the fighter without rage. And the fighter's accuracy is great, sure, but remember that the creature has low armor class, so it's not like the barbarian is going to have a hard time hitting it anyway. And then the fighter's main combat bonus is being able to crit so often because of their accuracy, but this creature is immune to crits. It's not that the fighter isn't going to help, it's just that if you do want to cast, let's say, runic weapon and add a weapon die to a character, you want it to be the barbarian in this case because you're going to support them even more. You're going to want to set up flanks with the barbarian. Even though, yes, there's low armor class, you would still want to support them because they are going to reliably do more damage in this situation. What about the opposite situation, though? You've got something with low hit points but high armor class. In that case, I would say set up the fighter, support the fighter. They are more accurate. You don't need a super hard blow, you just need an accurate strike in order to end the encounter, and the fighter is more accurate. So in this case, the barbarian should be setting up flanks for the fighter, allowing the fighter more actions to take those strikes. And this advice is not just for martials. You might go up against a creature that is weak to some type of energy damage. Well, in this case, you want to support your maybe alchemist who can target that, or a spellcaster who can as well, meaning that fighter and that barbarian that we were talking about earlier should do more debuffing type things like grabbing or tripping to set up that back line. And then the last example to give here, maybe you go up against something that's unholy or undead or has some sort of negative magic, in which case you need to support your casters who can counteract that magic in some way, even though maybe technically you could slug your way through it, fighting, doing a bunch of physical damage that is strongly resisted, and maybe crits are ignored again, as is often the case with these types of creatures. But you will again be better off knowing that the fight MVP for this fight is your spiritual backline, so support them. So overall, these tactics just are basics to focus on maximizing your actions, maximizing your strength, and quickly and efficiently dispatching of all of your enemies. You should consider all enemies in this game dangerous because, well, they are. There is a 20 on every dice, and I swear they come up a lot more often on GM dice than on player dice. What do you think, adventurers? Are there any key, kind of elementary basic level tactics that were missed? Or what about tactics that you disagree with? Again, I know that clearing lower level enemies first isn't always what people want to do, so maybe you have a good counter argument to that. Let's talk about it in the comments. Until then, remember that great teamwork and tactics are essential, but as I kind of said earlier, sadly, none of it matters unless the dice agree with you.